Well, just excited today to have a talk about accessible gaming. I think it's a really interesting topic with everything that's happening right now. There is so much of a focus on making content accessible, and I think gaming is obviously one of the areas where it's something that we obviously know a lot of people with disabilities play games, but the techniques and even the principles around how to do that successfully or learning from other people working on that, I think it's going to be an awesome discussion topic. So I'm really excited to have John here from Brooklyn Library to talk to us about his program. And I really know nothing about the program either, so I'm really interested to learn and have a discussion. Thanks.
Okay, hi everybody. Hi, nice to meet y'all. Thank you for coming today. It's great to get to share with you guys. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about something that I've become very interested in working with video games. Show of hands, who here plays games? Anyone plays games? I play a little games, not so much. It's not my primary, the recreation that I was raised on. It's something the younger kids like. I like to read books, which is why I became a librarian. So as I've explored this gaming world, one of the concepts I've become very interested in is this concept of the cheat code. And I started reading a professor named James Paul Gee, who wrote a book called What Video Games Have to Teach Us about literacy. And I'm just going to read to you guys a little bit about what he says. Professor James Paul Gee describes his experience using a cheat code to complete the video game Half-Life. Using a cheat code, I can give myself unlimited ammunition or infinite life. Of course, it's not much fun playing video games without being able to die. In this instance, I wanted to use a code that would simply remedy my ineptness at jumping so that I could finish the rest of the game on my own skill. The cheat code supplemented me in just the right way, allowing me to be more powerful while fulfilling my goal of finishing the game on my own as much as possible. Ironically, my individual achievement of finishing Half-Life, of which I was proud, was nonetheless a social achievement. I had tapped into a large network of interconnected chat rooms and game sites that offer other people's knowledge and many tools with which to supplement myself. Okay? This idea of the cheat code has powerful implications for access. Because if what G says is true, then cheat codes aren't just codes. They're keys that open doors so that a person with a physical disability can drive a car 150 miles an hour. So that a person with an intellectual disability can fight with the skill of the martial arts master. And a person with an emotional disability can become a superhero. The rule of three. One of the things that I like to do is make sure that there are as many options for as many different type of learners and gamers as possible. And sorry, you guys, you'll see that I'm jumping around from slides and presentations. The first type of gaming system we use is the Xbox One. Now, one of the things that's great about this is that the facial recognition, the responsiveness of the Kinect camera, and the hands-free gaming affords a level of interaction that we wouldn't have seen before. The PlayStation 4 is the standard gaming console that many people like to use. It has a lot of new accessibility options. Okay? Then my workhorse is the Xbox 360. This is the one that I have the most accessible controls for. Okay? And we're going to take a look at these right now. And there's the Xbox 360. I also use 3 different types of accessible controllers. This first one is the Adroit Switchblade. This allows me to reprogram buttons to different parts of a person's body and mount them on a chair or some other type of accessibility apparatus. The second one is the L-Pad. It's a large, oversized controller. It also comes with a gooseneck mount so that I can swivel a controller around to a person who may have limited control of their body below their neck. Okay? Finally, this is the Atrox Razor. This one can be opened up and the buttons can be reprogrammed and moved around. Now the thing that I find is that often people will try and use the traditional controllers as much as possible. In fact, they don't want to really indicate that they have a disability, and as much as they can, they're going to try and use the traditional controllers. What these controllers allow me to do is pull a young person off to the side. Because I keep multiple gaming systems on hand, configure that controller so it works for them, and discreetly bring them into the gaming process. The rule of 3 screens. So I have my little mini projector. This allows me to do gaming anywhere in any space, to limit the space to a very small screen, to make a very larger screen, and to generally be mobile so I can do gaming anywhere. Then I have my traditional standing monitor. And then I have a larger oversized screen. In fact, I have about 7 screens. And I don't run this as a single gaming program, I run it as an arcade. Now the reason that I do the arcade format is that it allows me to focus on my primary interest, which is not the technology. The technology is secondary. My primary interest is in recreational behavior and how to use the gaming and the gaming technology as a tool to facilitate this. Now, usually when I do my gaming arcade, as I said, I have the Xbox 360, the PlayStation 4, the Xbox One, but I also have an Atari 2600, several iPads, a PlayStation 1. And these are exploratory stations. That sort of cool factor, like, what is that, dude? All right? This allows me to rotate teenagers around the room and modify behavior and turn taking on the fly. Okay?
What space is that?
Oh, right over here, this is the Information Commons Lab at the Brooklyn Public Library, which is at 10 Grand Army Plaza's Central Library. And you'll see that even though we have the main screen, I have several screens set up in different corners depending on how many students I want to have. Now, accessories. Again, the main concept is not to make it overtly specific for young people who may have disabilities. We can't always see that. They don't always want to communicate that to us. But that we're leaving as many options for gaming open as possible. So I have my Big Mac switches. I have my trigger switches, my flat switches. And then now we're seeing a lot of emulator games that are browser based. So now I can use my switch adapter to create controllers on the fly. Okay? Now let's go back to what G told us. Okay? And one of the things he said in the finish of this passage was, my individual achievement of finishing Half-Life, of which I was proud, was nonetheless a social achievement. I had tapped into a larger network of interconnected chat rooms and game sites that offer other people's knowledge and many tools with which to supplement myself. One of the things that I find is my young people, my teenagers, are at the same time that they're being told to become more self-directed and more independent, they are in fact becoming more isolated and having less opportunities to interact with and join a community. This is happening at a critical time in their lives. So gaming is, although recreational, is so much more than that. It's a way to connect to people when you may not be able to leave a room. It's a way to feel and emote with people when you're not really great with social cues maybe. Here, for example, we see 2 young men, and what you're seeing is that they're involved in parallel play. They're playing together, but they're not interfering with each other. They still have their own independent space, but what are they doing? They're playing Airband. The computer game allows them to simulate musical instruments that they can play with each other, so they are in fact collaborating within their own separate space. Okay? These are the game masters, my 2 gaming interns. These are both individuals who are low vision. Okay? And they are role models in my program. And that's just me with a funny cardboard hat. And we were doing robot cardboard making, which making and gaming are tied and linked, of course. And here's one of my interns working with a younger person. We see a lot of this. This is one of the individuals from UCP who we did a gaming configuration for, and what he wanted to do was play Tekken. And this is where we use the Adroit Switchblade. One of the things that I find is that in the same instance when we go and ask somebody for a car, for example, we have something specific in mind, something that we want. In the same way, we want to create a gaming experience that's specific for this user. He wanted to play a fighting game, so that's what we helped him to do. So we put telescopic mounts on his wheelchair. We used the jelly button switches, and then you'll see that the Adroit Switchblade, and then we mounted some right onto his body. So he was hitting it 1, 2, 3, 4 for the multi-button smashes, okay? And then here, we ended up using a halo mount and mounting that switch right directly on his chin so he could control the direction, okay? This took us about an hour and a half to sit with him and try different moves, but eventually we were able to get a configuration that really worked for him.
So what maps that, or how do you map that to Tekken?
Let's see if I can show you right over here. Okay. Right here. You see it right up in that left corner? Each of these buttons will toggle out, and then there's a little depression on each side to map it to which particular button and button function you want to go, including directions. That was fast going through that. All right. And what we see is we're creating a social environment. Okay? All right. So that brings us to the end of the first part of our presentation. Okay? Now we're going to do something a little bit different. Just close out all this stuff. And some of you guys asked me what this funky little thing was when I first came in here. I'm going to show you that now. Okay, first, can anybody guess what this is?
Simon.
I was going to say Simon. Sometimes what Simon says.
Interesting. Simon Says. Any other guesses? What do you think by looking at it? What is this?
Some sort of switch.
Good. Very close. Okay, you see that it has different sides, and each of these sides is colored, though. What does that tell you? Could it be a game controller? Is this directional?
Seems like a game in itself.
Good. Any guesses?
Yeah, and some kind of interface to interact with the game.
That's probably the closest answer. This is an accessible musical instrument. I'm just waiting for that to load real quick. This is a Skoog. Now what you'll see is that it has a sensitivity bar at the bottom. But each of the sides is configurable. So if you are, for example, left-hand dominant and you wanted to make the right side more sensitive, you could do that. In addition, we have multiple instruments that we can choose to play. Now, I don't consider myself a musician. That's a blessing that I never felt like I had, okay? But who doesn't wish that they could play the piano artfully and beautifully? Who doesn't wish that they could create a masterpiece? The Skoog, like accessible controllers, affords us opportunities to explore a part of ourselves that we didn't know was there, but has always been there. Okay, when we're doing accessibility work, we're not making something. We're not making somebody into something. We're bringing out what was always there. Okay, we're not creators, we're pruners. And we can see that even this is music for everybody. It used to be, there was a time when we couldn't access different things. But then there was a time when we didn't have curb cuts and people in wheelchairs couldn't access a curb. That time is done. We have the technology now. We have the ability to facilitate all the access that we want to see in the world, whether it's access to a video game, whether it's access to a person across the world through a chat feature, video chat feature, or whether it's the music. Inside all of us, okay? You guys, I think that's everything that I have for right now. If you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer questions.
So that controller, is that a, like what's the story of that controller?
So this was developed at the University of Edinburgh by the SCU team, and that was Professor Shogler. Their idea was they hypothesized that proto-language, the language between babies and care providers, was that this was something that was lacking in young people who were diagnosed as having autism. His idea that his hypothesis was that proto-language was the same as what improv jazz players do. It's this dynamic communicative back and forth, and that by creating an instrument that would facilitate that, you could teach that dynamic communication using music. The only problem is that you needed an accessible musical instrument. So you see with violins, they create beautiful sounds, and they're designed to do that. They're not necessarily designed to be easily played, so that's why when I pick up a violin, I sound like I'm killing a cat. And the learning curve is long. This shortens that learning curve so that we can focus on other things. So for example, the Skoog is very powerful. You can play it at a very basic level, but you can also adjust and modify. So what I do you know what? You want to do a song real quick? I'll show you how to do this, okay. Ready? And this is the improv portion of this. So let's do Ball and a Biscuit. Let's get by the White Stripes. Tab, key of, and so what I want to do is figure out what key Ball and a Biscuit is in. Okay, because I'm not good at music. I don't know all these things. That's not quite giving it to me. Let's see. Guitar tabs. Let's see. Let's do that one. That's ultimate guitar tabs again. Let's see. Right. Let's do in the key of Ball and a Biscuit. And while we're waiting for that to load, I'm going to bring up YouTube. I'll do Ball and a Biscuit. Could be right. Let's see.
It's quite possible that I'm your third man, girl.
That's not quite right. You said E, right?
It's a fact that I'm the seventh son. I'm the seventh son. Right now you could care less about me, but soon enough you will care by the time I'm done. Let's have a ball and a biscuit, sugar, and take our sweet little time about it.
Let's turn this off and talk about this. And so what I think is interesting about this. Pretty good, right?
I just wanted to appreciate that.
No, that's all right. And so one of the things is I'm not a musician. And I think maybe you said that it was E. sometimes it's hard for me to tell. I don't have that.
If you land on the green and you play it, that's the root.
Ah, why is that the root? Because that's where it starts? So this is the thing. These are all things that I have a hard time with, but I can put in different songs and I can look to see what chord it is and I can just keep pushing through until I figure it out because I'm limiting the number of notes. But even when I have somebody who has a more profound intellectual disability, for example, I'll isolate so that I only have blue and yellow. So, and then I'll introduce the next note until it's something that they can handle. Okay? We can even see that this has an instructional function. Let's see if we can do, oh, I'm not doing Billie Jean, that's crazy. Let's do old McDonald's. And so for our more basic learner, somebody who's even a young child, they can explore these ideas and then transpose them to another instrument. And the same way we can facilitate learning using these different types of controllers and different ways to access computers, technology, whatever it may be.
So is that device only purposed in a music context, or is it as a controller?
Look, all right, look, man. After we're done, I'll give you Dr. Shogler's email, and you can email him about that. I don't know how many times I said, can I turn this into a gaming controller? And he's like, come out to Scotland and talk to me about it.
Does the square part also act as a controller?
Do you mean the, yes. So, and what you'll see is actually, let's see, where is it? You can actually make it harmonic also, which, oh, right, poly. So now, if I press two sides, it'll cancel each other out. But. Now, if I was really gifted, what I'd do is get 3 of these and put chords on each of these, play 2, and then have a third. Why are you pointing at this guy?
Like you can grab the key from that, so I think that they've got someone here.
So, right, so I mean, you know, a lot of times what I find, it's just how much equipment that I actually have to share. I always get interest.
I have a question in the back here.
Absolutely.
Are there any virtuosos of this instrument?
What's that?
Virtuosos.
So, you know, it's funny that you bring this up because another concept that I've been really interested in is I find so often teachers and educators are focused on the best of their students. Whether it's art teachers or videographers or musicians, they want to take their student who has the most aptitude. But maybe this isn't the student who has the greatest gift or the most important thing to say or is the most expressive. And we often tend to overlook those students, those performers, those athletes, without really giving them the full chance to really express themselves. And so when we have these tools, yes, there are many people who are virtuosos and who have a gift and an elevated ability in a particular area. Does that mean that you can't make beautiful art or that you can't create beautiful music? No, that's not the case. And some of the best things that we see come from people who have to reach a little bit deeper. So there's something to be said for being a virtuoso, but maybe there's something a little more to be said for being a neophyte. Because then the world is always new, there's always more to learn.
So if you were going to rank accessibility features within games, could you just sort of like step through what the top 20 things would be as far as a game is being designed and developed, what the feature set would be that a developer would want to be thinking about?
Excellent, this is an excellent question. Okay, one of the best ways to look at this, and I think you guys will probably all understand this, just look at the progression of gaming history. So if we look at Pac-Man, for example, right? The functions within Pac-Man are simple. Forward, left, right, back. This is something that we can all understand at a very basic level. And we see this in game development, how you start the game at the sort of evaluation testing level, and it's simple and it's a little easier, and then it gets more complex. Once you start adding more complexity to a game, you have to think about how a person is going to accomplish that. How are they going to do the multi-button mash? The interesting thing is the level of drive that the students do have to learn it. And this is where the idea of the cheat code can be especially useful for game designers, I think. Because one of the things that I realized as I was reading Professor G's book was like, God, that's happened to me, and I didn't have a cheat code. I didn't know to read a magazine. I have no friends who play video games who would tell me, yeah, do A, B, A, B, A, B, back, and then do this, and you'll pass that level. I don't hang out with teenagers. And so I would play these games, and I'd be like, and I'd just stop. I wasn't connected to that network. It's the network that allows us to move past to these different levels. Okay? In the same way, I think that you could add cheat code functionality to certain games. And you see some gamers actually doing this. Now, the other thing to consider is what the environment affords. So, for example, one of my big failures when I was doing gaming was with individuals with more profound visual loss. Because I had worked with teens with some vision loss, what happened was they were able to make the accommodation. But then with the young people who had more profound vision loss where they could see very little, I needed to change my mind state to auditory games. I couldn't even get my brain to go there without actually depriving my own sight. And this is what it often takes. You don't realize, so for example, and again, the perfect example of your question about game design, when I play the Kinect games, this is always a problem for young people in wheelchairs. Okay? So you're looking at game choice also, what affords opportunities. So what I do with young people in wheelchairs is Kinect Fruit Ninja. Because it's arms-based, that movement of the legs doesn't really matter as long as I position the Kinect in the right way. And I just did this morning. They had a blast because now they're chopping stuff up. The other game that works for young people who are in wheelchairs is Forza. Because you can do two-player and you can do it with the Kinect or the controller. So you can minimize that differences. This is one of the things that we want to do is create that commonality within the game that we don't see, that parity, that equity that we don't see in the real world because it evens out in the game. Believe me, when you see a kid with some type of disability beating a typically developing kid, they let them know. In no uncertain terms, did you see that? I just destroyed you, man. They let them know, you know, and it's a beautiful thing to watch.
I think that's, I haven't even thought of that from the access point of the body controllers. I think it's really interesting.
Well, and I think also, and you see this with the Skoog, and you see this with the new Kinect controller. We're there. That Kinect controller, in a couple of minutes, I seem to recall that there were some guys in France who were doing sign language with the Kinect One, with the Xbox One Kinect, and it was able to read those signs. So the technology is there. It's just a matter of exploring and beta testing these products with the individuals who need to use them. And you know, as the person who sort of goes out and does this, it's an involved process. We need a little bit more time. However, more surprising than anything else is the success. Is how often you succeed and this young person really is jazzed and they couldn't be happier. And I didn't understand it at first either because I'm not a gamer. Oh, so what? What does it have to do with the price of milk? Get out of here. For them, it was a transformative event. And I had one young man, and he actually had traumatic brain injury. And he said, this is the only way I can stabilize and normalize. I can't even regulate my own emotions at this point. This is where I can come into myself and be myself. So oftentimes we're thinking about physical disabilities, but a lot of times it's the young people who need something that is both unknown, that they can explore and learn within that framework, but yet known enough that they have the power and ability to master it. That was the first thing that I saw when I looked at the Tomb Raider game, is how Lara Croft has her own personality. She rebels against her autocratic figure and explores the game on her own, and this very much parallels how teenagers think, you know? Which is why we create an environment that is exciting for them to explore and fosters that independence. For young people who have so little independence in their life. If you are in a wheelchair, you don't go hang out. You get on a bus when somebody tells you to, and you get off that bus when somebody tells you to. If you are a young person who has been identified as being on what was called the autism spectrum, you don't get the opportunity to socialize even when you want to. The digital place it's a world where you can do that. And for them, it's a lifeline. It's how they're able to live in this world. And what is very interesting is that this demographic is only going to grow. What happens when these young people hit 30, 40, 50? Believe me, they're going to keep gaming. It may be the only thing they do.
I wonder if you've read the work of Jane McGonigal. She's a game researcher at this place called the Institute for the Future, or something like that. And she wrote a book called Reality is Broken. And that was her first book, and it's about how gaming can sort of instill a lot of these like positive thinking and communal and basically just like ways that we can game together, like through as a giant community to bring about social change and other things. And her second book is called Super Better, and she speaks to what you were just mentioning about like therapy and gaming. So she went through a severe concussion,
Right.
and through gaming. But like she invented a game for herself. So it wasn't a video game, it was a very simple game that she called Super Better. But through this game, by using like game logic,
Right.
she was able to overcome her concussion and to go back into that game.
It's interesting that you say that, because one of the things about game logic, which was something that was new to me, that the kids really take to this. Because when I'm putting rules and prescriptions on a young person, that's coming from the external world. The rules of a game are very much closer to the rules of the natural world. I mean, you could run into the street. I don't regulate what cars do, so I can't control that. In the same way, the game affords that same limitation, which gives you a way to sort of explore different things. But it also gives you an opportunity to explore relationships and identities that may not be accessible to you in the world of the real. You can't try and be an elf or an orc, or maybe you want to try being a different gender character. It's all good in games. You can do what you want, and that's a really powerful thing.
What started the program at Brooklyn Library? Like, when did you guys start that?
So this was something that was sort of a shared brainchild between myself and Carrie Banks, who runs the accessible service at the Brooklyn Public Library. And it was just based on this idea, and very much what you said, this idea that you can have a sense of community in this digital world that you can't have. Really what it was one of the challenges I face as a librarian is that all of the young people with disabilities, by and large, get on buses when they go home. So they don't come to a local shared community and say, hey, that's Billy, who I see every day. They go to school, and then they often bus someplace else in the city. So you can go to school in Brooklyn and live in Queens and never make the connection between your community place and the teens who live there and the teens who are in your school. And we determined that the one thing proof positive that would draw them was games. We was like, we can get them with games. Then it became this idea that we needed to make sure that every single person, when they came in, could game at will. At first we started with 2 systems, and what ended up happening was that it wasn't enough. There were people who were waiting. Right now, I have about 50 teens who come in to my arcade from 12 to 3, and everybody games. And they all take turns, and now they know each other, which is an important thing. So now, although I don't allow them to go online and connect with because parents with credit card information, no, you're not doing that where I work, but they will connect afterwards and play afterwards. you know.
So when is the event? Like, you do it every
Fourth Saturday of the month. Every fourth Saturday we do accessible gaming, and every second Saturday we do universal making, where we build stuff or make stuff. We're making. This Saturday we're doing stop motion animation and puppets, paper bag puppets, and then next weekend we're doing shadow puppetry. Always making something. Yeah, it's cool stuff.
Great. Do we have any more questions?
Have you connected to any charities such as Able Gamers or Special Effects?
So I have not connected with Special Effects. I have co-presented with Able Gamers, and I would like to work with them a little bit more. I think one of the things about that is sometimes I wonder if as a librarian I'm the best facilitator for those type of relationships, because I do have to sort of stay impartial. Having said that, Able Gamers does great work. And what was the other one that you mentioned?
Special Effects?
Would you mind
They're in
talking
the
to me?
UK. Essentially just like I'm with Able Gamers. They're pretty much just like us, but in the
Excellent.
UK, so-
Yeah. So let's talk.
Yeah. Exactly.
Excellent.
One last thing.
Sure.
Just going back to, it made me think of that first book I mentioned, Reality is Broken. Jane McGonigal was involved with an experimental game that was actually put on in the New York Public Library.
Right.
Just a few blocks away. And that was like sort of a crowdsourcing where they had like a lot of different, like, I think it was teenagers come in and like there was like a mission, and they had to use like collectively pull books from the library, from different sections in order to like come together with this solution. And it was, this was to demonstrate sort of the collaborative effects of gaming. So my question is, do you see this project that you're currently doing, like going into designing games like that integrate sort of library and research methods with games rather than video games?
Not exactly like that, which is probably what my colleagues would be more interested in. But no, one of the actual things that I would look at as a very simple way to use game theory is, because a lot of the young people that I work with, they do take transportation on the bus through their school. When they become more independent, what we want them to do is to be travel trained. Okay? I think it's very highly possible that you could use Google Maps to map out different locations, apply that into an app-based game, and use that as a travel training tool, where it is in fact a game, and that would be crowdsourced. I think we are going to see a lot of that. There's a couple of years ago, the big talk was the Internet of Things, but the idea that people are going to be part of that connection to the internet, that we are part of that and a bridge and a tool to make that happen. Yes, I absolutely think that you are going to see that happen in the next couple of years. And I don't know if any of you are aware of Jason DeSilva's work exactly. So he has been going out to restaurants and facilities and live documenting which restaurants and facilities are accessible. This is happening in real time, and that's not a game, but it certainly is functioning like something that we play. And the more we play, the more accessible the world becomes. It's not such a bad thing.
Okay, well, thank you, John.
Thank you, Alex.
Just wanted to, again, thanks. It was second Saturdays?
Fourth Saturday is the arcade from 12 to 3, and the Makerspace is second Saturday, which is this Saturday from 10 to 12.
Great. So join John at these events. Join us on the first Tuesday of every month. We have a meetup group at meetup.com/A11YNYC, where we post the announcements of the events and follow-ups on the events themselves. I wanted to give a shout out to Norma, our remote captioner. Hi, Norma. And also on the topic of accessible gaming, wanted to plug our mainstay captioner, Mirabai Nights game, Steno Arcade. And she has a campaign on Indiegogo right now. You should go contribute and help her create an awesome game to help train people, be stenographers, for captioning for people who are deaf and hard of hearing. So
What's that called?
Steno Arcade, STNO. Arcade.
I think the campaign's called Steno Hero though.
And the actual campaign is called Steno Hero, like Guitar Hero. but
Yeah.
It's an arcade. Is there anything else I'm forgetting, Thomas?
We do have our next speaker scheduled for May, so we're on top of that.
So we're queued up for more great events. Keep track of us on Meetup and on Twitter, A11YNYC on Twitter. And thank you all for coming, hang out. We have the space, so grab a drink and there's more pizza and talk amongst yourselves. So thanks again.